justify the explosion in the 1800s in the slave trade. If our black brothers and sisters are only animals, well, then we can abuse them and we can, enslave them to do our work. Here is the Reverend Kingsley. Remember, he's the pastor that gave his blessing to Darwinism. He says this: the black people of Australia, exactly the same race as the African Negro, cannot take in the gospel. Poor brutes in human shape, they must perish off the face of the earth like brute beasts. That's a pastor. I hope you find that offensive. That is just disgusting. The people that are black, they have a different skin color than you and they can't take in the gospel? What? Because of a skin pigment? That's disgusting thinking. And yet that was the folks that were at the very heart of evolution right from the beginning. And so you wonder why slavery took off. They gave it scientific justification and said, oh, people with a different skin color are animals, so we can enslave them. And we don't have to worry about that. And of course, they were in what was already slavery in Africa, one tribe enslaving another, literally was just ballooned, expanded on, and became a massive slave trade. And you had the one tribe enslaving the other, the ships going back and forth, carrying thousands of slaves to the Americas, to the plantations, to some of these islands, and of course being sold like animals on the market there. And here is a quote from Stephen Gould, and it's important to note he is an evolutionist from Harvard University, and he says this: biological arguments for racism increased by orders of magnitude following the acceptance of evolutionary theory by scientists in most nations. What's he saying? Somebody put that in your own words. What's he saying?
Evolution increased racism.
Exactly. Here's an evolutionist from Harvard University saying, this is the facts. You can't deny it. Because of Darwin and the theory of evolution, racism shot through the roof. And the scientific logic was this simple. All these different races of man came from apes, and some we think, the white, Europeans, we think are further evolved than others. And we happen to think we're the most evolved, right? And that gave them an excuse to stomp on everybody else. Racism. And you say, well, maybe that was just back in the 1800s. No, as late as 1904, in this country, the evolutionists caught this poor pygmy and in Africa, and he was set up in a zoo, really, as a display to show his lack of evolutionary progress. And you see him there along with an ape. A human being put in a zoo, put in a cage, like an animal, on display. Wicked activity that was done by these evolutionists to try to sell their theory of evolution. Now people say, well, maybe that's just the way these kind of aristocratic, snobby, arrogant people of the Victorian era thought. Well, no, there was a lot of Europeans that were very much against it, and in fact it was the Christians like William Wilberforce who fought against slavery, and the Christian missionary David Livingstone, that while these guys were saying they can't take in the gospel, they have no soul, they're like animals, missionary David Livingstone was going to Africa to win them to Jesus. So it wasn't just all Europeans thinking that way. No. This was the evolutionist and the evolutionist way of thinking. And there's no justification in the Bible for it at all. The Bible says, have we not all one Father? Hath not one God created us? Why do we deal treacherously every man against his brother by profaning the covenant of our fathers? So there's absolutely no excuse for racism. All it is slightly different pigment of skin color, and for that you're going to say they're animals and have no soul, and we have a soul. It's absolute a lie from the pit of hell. And it came really to a head because of evolutionary teaching. Well, what about communism? Here's Karl Marx. And he is the one that wrote the Communist Manifesto. And he dedicated his book to Charles Darwin, saying it's the basis of natural history for our view. This is the guy who wrote the book on communism. And he says, yes, our justification for communism is evolution. Charles Darwin. Here in Germany, Hitler, the German Führer has consistently sought to make the practice of Germany conform to the theory of evolution. Yeah, they don't like these quotes when I get in the universities and start giving them. They don't like it at all. But this is the facts. This is the history. This is the reality. This is why it's important that we deal with this. Because if this is let to go to its full fruition in society, we'll go right back to that kind of abuse. Now, my parents escaped from East Germany. So some of this stuff for me is actually personal. But here is Hitler's book. And Hitler's book was full of racism, racist philosophy. He says on page 216, no more than nature desires the mating of weaker with stronger individuals, even less does she desire the blending of the higher with the lower races. And he was a racist, and he was proud of it. He'd say, just like we are going to breed good dogs, and we breed good cows, and we breed other things, we're not going to let anybody just produce offspring. No, no, no. We're going to weed out the less fit, like Jews, and like blacks, and like Christians. Yeah, let's weed out all those people with these weird thinking, get rid of them too right away. And we're going to have a strong race of, superior Aryan blood here. And that was his thinking. Influential German geneticist and Darwin apologist Dr. Ludwig Plate wrote, progress in evolution goes forward over millions of dead bodies of inferior humans. The key elements in the worldview have been constructed and repeatedly reaffirmed by linguists, racial anthropologists, evolutionary scientists, and geneticists. This was their justification for the final solution for the Holocaust. We will make a better world by eliminating all the unfit. And, of course, we're the most fit, the Aryans, the Germans. And the rest is a matter of 20th century history. And here's a quote by Stephen Meyer. He says, historically, Western society has derived its belief in the dignity of man from its Judeo-Christian belief that man is the glory of God, made in his image. According to this view, human rights depend upon the Creator, who made man with dignity and not upon the state. Question for you. If the place that we get our human rights is not from a Creator, but it's because the state has been so nice and so benevolent as to give us these rights, well, then the state can also do what? They can take them back away again, can't they? But if our rights come from the Creator, then no state has the right to take them from us. The state is only recognizing God-given rights, and it would be wrong for them not to recognize it or to take it away from us. See, that's very important. That's kind of bedrock in who we are as a nation. Well, how about Joseph Stalin? Stalin, at a very early age, while still a pupil at the ecclesiastical school, Comrade Stalin developed a critical mind and revolutionary sentiments, and he began to read Darwin and became an atheist. Soviet dictator Stalin is reported to have killed 60 to 100 million of his own people. Brutal, brutal, wicked, wicked man. And again, he was persuaded of the rightness of that position by reading Darwin. In China, Mao Zedong took over in 1949, after World War II. They began killing Christians by the thousands. Mao murdered over 45 million people. Mao listed Darwin and Huxley as his two favorite authors. Do you think they influenced him? Oh yeah, absolutely. Charles Darwin himself said this in a letter. Looking at the world at no distant date, what an endless number of lower races will have been eliminated by the higher civilized races throughout the world. Well, he was a bit of a prophet, because using his theory, that's exactly what people began to do. In Russia, in China, and in Germany. Even in this country, under the banner of eugenics, thousands of people were forcefully sterilized in the early 1900s. I don't have time to get into that whole saga, but that was done under eugenics, and it was really started by Darwin's cousin, a guy by the name of Galton, and really pushed forward in this country by Planned Parenthood, Mary Sanger. Go back and read the stories about Marge Sanger, and just the whole story of Planned Parenthood. It's really amazing what they got away with in this country. Okay. We need to move on here. But creation in the United States of America was still taught well into the 20th century, well into the 1900s. There was one event that changed that? Does anybody know what event was kind of a historical watershed in American education? Very good. The Scopes monkey trials. In 1925, there was a trial that took place that really popularized evolutionary teaching. Here is the actual courthouse where this trial took place in Dayton, Tennessee in 1925. And it was Clarence Darrow versus William Jennings Bryan. They had this big thing, and it was a show trial, really. They said, you teach evolution, we'll sue you. Then we'll bring in these guys, and it'll be good for our town, a publicity event. And it was a huge stunt. But it was successful for the evolutionists in popularizing the teaching of evolution. And so after that, in really the post-World War II environment, it began to really become common to teach evolution in biology, chemistry, world history, and geology. In 1981, some of the states, mostly in the South, said, wait a minute, this isn't right. We're just letting the evolutionists have all the educational time. We're not teaching creation at all anymore. It's not what the parents want. And the parents, after all, are the parents of the kids. And the taxpayers, after all, are paying for the schools and the teachers. So they passed laws in Louisiana and Arkansas that were called the equal treatment laws. Said, okay, you're going to teach evolution for an hour, that's fine, but then you got to teach creation for an hour. Fair is fair. Teach both models. I think that's pretty reasonable. But the ACLU and the People for the American Way and the atheists and the teachers' unions, they fought these equal treatment laws all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Edwards versus Aguilar that the states cannot mandate the teaching of creation. It didn't say teachers can't teach it, it just said states can't force them to teach it. Okay? And that's very important. That was 1981. So that was kind of a pivotal case. And teachers today often are afraid to present creation science because of legal threats from the ACLU. And so the ACLU and teachers unions are kind of bullies, really, because that's not what the Supreme Court said, but the teachers are just scared of a lawsuit. And so they're afraid to teach it. Now, Adolf Hitler said this, let me control the textbooks and I will control the state. Do you think he was right? What do you think? I think he's right on. You start controlling the textbooks and what they're teaching the next generation, and you absolutely will influence the way the country goes. And Adolf Hitler may have been wicked, but he certainly wasn't dumb. He was a very brilliant, wicked man. So that's a little of the history of the controversy, how we got to the way we are. Now I want to talk about the limitations of science. Whenever I have a debate with evolutionists, or even begin a series like we're doing this weekend, I like to define terms, so we all know what we're talking about. And so let's define our terms for just a moment here, and I'd like somebody to help me out. Please don't be bashful, there's no wrong answer, nobody's going to make fun of you. What would you say is a definition of science? Somebody give me a working definition of science.
It has to be repeatable and observable.
Okay, very good. Got a couple of key elements in there, repeatable and observable. Somebody else.
The world around us.
Okay, so it's not just repeatable and observable, but it involves the natural world. Very good. That's another great concept. Somebody else. Anybody else?
The root word is knowledge.
Knowledge, okay, so gnosis, we talked about that in the Greek, science. So knowledge involving some of these elements of the natural world, we pretty much closed in on it. I would say science is knowledge obtained by the scientific method. But what is the scientific method? Does anybody remember? You kind of hit on it, brother, just a minute ago. It is observation. Remember the story, I don't even know if it's a true story, but of Sir Isaac Newton, he's sitting underneath the apple tree, and one of the apples, remember the story? Falls out of the tree, doinks him upside the head, he goes, oh, gravity, apple, gravity, right? And it all comes in one fell swoop. It's probably just a, an urban legend, but an initial observation, and then you say, I'm going to form a hypothesis around that. And I'm going to try this same thing. Maybe I'll try dropping an apple on a mountaintop. Oh, it still falls. Let me try it way down at sea level. Oh, it still falls. Let me try it here. Let me try it over in France on the other side of the English Channel. And so we experiment, and eventually we're going to come out with what's called a theory, a general explanation of how things work, or a law. That is a very regular principle, usually modeled with mathematics, or a fact, just a well-confirmed assertion. And so this becomes our body of knowledge, and really our way of doing inquiry that we call science, the scientific method. Now, let's define a couple more terms. Science, as we just described it, can describe but cannot ultimately explain. For example, science can say what gravity does, but what gravity is, we still don't know. We don't know why objects are attracted to each other. Where are the strings that pull them together? Well, we don't know. So we can describe it, but we can't really explain it. And then science is susceptible to constant revision. Has science changed in the last 100 years? Oh, yeah, right? So if you're going to go and you put your foot on science and say, here, I'm going to stand, I'm going to be a man of science, well, guess what? What you're standing on is sand. It's going to change in the next 50 years, dramatically probably. Has God's word changed in the last 100 years? No. That's something you can put your feet on. But we have mistakes and observations. We have natural prejudice. We have just misunderstandings in science all the time. It happens out there. People aren't perfect. And science is not able to answer moral questions. For example, science can invent an atom bomb, but it can't tell you whether or not to drop it. That's a moral question. We've got to go deeper down in our bodies of knowledge to philosophy and religion to really understand the moral issues. And science is based on faith at its core. Sometimes people say, well, I'm a man of science. I don't like faith. I was flying to California a couple months ago. I was out there, and I went to a church, and a friend of mine got me in there, and I'd spoken a couple times, and so I was going out to California, and I had to get up at like 3 in the morning to catch the right bus, to get down to Logan Airport, to fly out like this red-eye flight early in the morning. And so I was tired, and I was ready to just sit down in my seat and like zonk off, right? And but I said hello to the guy next to me. He said hi, and his name was Schultz. And I said, hey Schultz, how's it going? What do you do? And he told me what he did. He said, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a person that goes around, travels around, and speaks on science. And I'm a Christian. I speak about creation, evolution, and things like that. He says, no creationist is a real scientist. I said, I'm not getting any sleep on this flight. So what do you mean by that? He said, well, no. Creationists, they operate on faith, which is exactly the opposite of science. Now, I am an atheist, and I am a man of science. All right, let's talk. Right? And as it turns out, and I tried to point out to Schultz, every one of us operates on faith every day. You came in here, I didn't see any of you check the pew to make sure it's solid, make sure Brother John or Pastor Dwayne didn't get under there, maybe cut out the legs just so it would fall over, we'd all laugh at you, right? In complete faith, you just sat down. You go up to a room that says men or women on it, and you get in and you feel for the light, and you flick the switch on, for all you know, you could be turning on the gas chamber. You've never been there before, you didn't check out the electrical, you just flipped it. You say, well, come on, it said men is a switch, it's a light, it's kind of obvious. Oh, I'm not saying it's not obvious, but you didn't check it out, you went on faith. I agree, it's a reasonable faith. It's faith. Science, at its core, is based in faith. Faith that the world is real, and not just a figment of our imagination. Faith that it's repeatable, and laws of the past will continue to hold for the present. This is stuff that science itself can't address. It's deeper down in the toolkit. Science can't even authenticate science. Observation can't authenticate how to do observation. Science can't tell you what is and what isn't science. We need philosophy to tell us that. So there are limitations of science. And we all have to have faith. We all have to have philosophy, a worldview. And we all do, even Schultz. And at the end of the day, it's religious oftentimes. It's religious. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. So the objective needs to be workability. That's our goal. That's our objective, not truth. Science can't give you absolute truth. Science is changeable. Science gives us insight. But science really is helping us to bring the world under control, to subdue it, that dominion mandate. It's about what's workable, how to bring things under control. See, we got to go somewhere else for truth. like the Bible. Here's a question. Is creation religion? Why is this an important question? The reason it's an important question is because the Supreme Court, when they said you cannot force teachers to teach creation, they said it is a violation of the separation of church and state. Creation is religion. And so you are bringing religion into the science classroom and forcing these teachers to teach religion. And we have the separation of church and state, so you can't do that. That was the argument. Not that there was no evidence for creation, but no. The argument that won the day before the Supreme Court was separation of church and state. So let me ask the question, what do you guys think? Do you think creation is a religion? And here's what we're going to do. Because a lot of you guys, you're kind of bashful, and that's okay. I mean, you're kind of checking this thing out, you're kind of checking me out, we're kind of like, two dogs kind of sniffing at each other's nose. We don't know each other very well. But I want everybody to participate so nobody feels left out. I want everybody to raise their hands, yes or no. Don't feel bad at me if you got me half going one way, half going another way, because it's kind of a complicated question. I mean, it was in front of the Supreme Court for a good reason. How many of you would say, is creation religion? Yes, they would say it is. How many would say yes, it is?
What's your definition of religion?
Oh, really good. I'm liking this guy right now.
Yeah.
Let's go with your definition for right now. How many of you would say yes, it is? We got 1, okay, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many say no, it's not? Okay, we got maybe 10, 15 say it's not. Okay, somebody that, I won't pick on you if you don't want to say that's okay, but would somebody like to tell me why they think it is a religion? Anybody? It's okay if you don't want to, that's fine. Maybe I can help you out. If we teach creation in the schools, isn't there the implication that there must be a God, right? And even implication that there's right and wrong, and maybe accountability to that God. And aren't those kind of religious concepts, right? That's kind of where the Supreme Court went with it. Some that say, no, it's not a religion, tell me why you would say, no, it's not a religion. Yes?
Religion is man-made, creation is God-made.
Okay, very good. So there's this dichotomy. We're not talking about man-made rules, morals, attempts to gain favor with some deity. We're talking about God's work. Starting in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Somebody else? Anybody else?
If you believe in evolution, then it is. If you do believe that evolution could not have happened, then creation is not a religion.
Okay, the simple fact that we need to have a designer shouldn't necessarily force us into any one particular religion. Is that a fair way of stating what you're saying here?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of going to be my point here now. We could, for example, define creation. Somebody said, okay, we define things. Okay, here's how we're going to define creation. Abrupt appearance by design. Abrupt appearance by design. By the way, I don't typically define religion, but because the question came up, if you look at Webster's, I may not quote it exactly here, word for word, but here's the idea of it. It's a belief system that involves origins, destiny, and morality. A belief system that involves origins, destiny, and morality. According to that definition, what else is a religion?
Evolution.
Evolution too, right? So, okay, but we'll get to that a little later on. But abrupt appearance by design is how we'll define creation. Now, lots of different religious groups could espouse that. Catholics, Muslims, Jews, I don't know, probably even Hindus could, right? Just some God came along and suddenly made things as opposed to it slowly, gradually coming into existence, goo to you via the zoo, right? Now, there are philosophical assumptions. We talked about this a minute ago. There are certainly some things that get pulled in if you're going to teach creation, but they're no different than the evolutionary positions of faith. Folks, we just got done talking about all the things that kind of came along because of Charles Darwin's book. Did it have ramifications? Oh, yes! Communism, evolution brought in communism and racism and some of this bigotry and some of this socialism and genocide. A lot of that came about because of the implications of evolution. These are just animals that we can mistreat, these lower species, right? Now, follow me here. I could go into a college or a high school or a junior high school and teach about a fine-tuned universe. That is, a universe that's so orderly could not come about from an explosion. I could teach that. I could also teach about the failure of spontaneous generation. Life does not come from non-life. I could talk about abrupt appearance in the fossil record and designs in biology without discussing any religion. I haven't espoused Catholicism, Islam, Judaism, Mormonism, Protestantism. I haven't done any of that. Right? Why can't I do that? See? That's my argument. Now let's flip this whole coin the other way and let's ask a different question. Let's ask, is evolution science? And of course the evolutionists are going to say, absolutely it is. Well, let's ask you guys. What do you think? Please participate. How many of you think evolution is science? One. Okay. How many say no, it's not? Okay. Most everybody else says it's not. Okay. Somebody that says it's not science, tell me why it's not.
It's not repeatable.
Not repeatable. Ooh, good. All right, we're going to get to that. Very good.
It has to be observed.
Okay. Observable and repeatable. This is scientific method stuff. I was just talking about this. Okay. In defense of the young lady here, isn't some of what Charles Darwin wrote about the variation in rabbits' colors and hair, and maybe nature selecting the more long-haired and the short-haired, isn't that observable?
But it doesn't call species.
Okay, so here's where it becomes real important to define what word? Evolution, right? So I'm going to define it this way. Molecules to man transformation. By the way, we'll talk about this a little bit more tomorrow. You can hardly find two evolutionists that can agree on a definition of evolution. There's like 10 different definitions. But I'm going to define it this way, molecules to man transformation, because if you can't get from molecules to man, then you really don't have an alternative to creation. You still need a creator. You need a full alternative, or else it isn't an origins model that can replace creation. So molecules to man transformation, that's what it means, at least in the origins debate. Now, by that definition, it's not testable by the scientific method. These origins cannot be observed or repeated. You know, let me see a Big Bang. Please, can I come to your laboratory tomorrow at 2:30? I'd like to see a Big Bang, an explosion that creates an orderly universe. What? I can't do that for you. Okay, well then it's not observable. Can I please come to your laboratory tomorrow? I want to see life come from non-life. Take some rocks, we'll sterilize them, we'll, blast ultraviolet light on them or whatever, we'll sterilize all known life, we'll add a little bit of pure distilled water to it, we'll mix it up, and I want you to see something alive coming out of that. I can't do that in my lab. Well, you're right. You're not going to observe it. You're not going to repeat it. This is not science. Oh, it might be speculation, it might be philosophy, it might be your personal opinions, but it's not science. It's no more science than creationism, that's for sure. See? Much of evolutionary theory is metaphysical assumptions, philosophical positions. Even the fundamental tenet of survival of the fittest is a tautology. What is a tautology? It is a statement that is based in a definition. For example, if I said to you, the Bible is the Word of God. You said, well, how do you know that? And I said, well, flip, 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 flip. 2 Timothy 3:16, all Scripture is given by inspiration of God, is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. The man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished in all good works. Case proved, Bible's the Word of God. And if you were a skeptic, you might say, well, wait a minute. You're just using the Bible to prove that the Bible is the Word of God. That's reasoning in circles. That's assuming what you're supposed to prove. Okay? That's not a good way to prove the inspiration of the Bible. Now, I believe in the inspiration of the Bible, please understand. But that's reasoning in circles, a tautology. And survival of the fittest is a tautology. Turns out the only way you can define fitness is to look what survives. That's the definition of fitness, is to throw these rabbits out there. If the dark ones survive better, they're more fit by definition. So then to say, well, that proves survival of the fittest. Well, there's no way that it couldn't, because that's how you define fitness to begin with. See? And there is no way of defining fitness any other way. Life is too complicated, too many factors, so much sloshing around, so much luck and happen chance and hurricanes and all climate and all this stuff, that there's no way that we can predict what's going to survive. So what survives is what survives, and we say it's the most fit. That's just the reality of biology. And so it's a tautology. It doesn't give us any information. A guy by the name of Sir Karl Popper came along, and he established a test for what is science, which is very good. It kind of runs along the ideas of the scientific method. And he says this: it must be vulnerable to falsification. That doesn't mean your theory is false, but it must be vulnerable to falsification. There must be a way to put it to the test. For example, I don't know if I've met you before. My name's Dave.
Junior Lee.
Junior Lee? Pleasure. Let's say Junior Lee has a theory. And his theory is this: if you put a banana peel in your shoe, you will run 10 times as fast. And I'm a little bit dubious, but then I see Junior Lee enroll in the Boston Marathon, and he wins! And he's not the youngest guy running, but he's just blowing past them all. I'm like, give me one of those banana peels. I stick it in my shoe, and man, now I'm running. Now I'm getting second place in the marathon, right behind him. Well, pretty soon people are going to start to believe he's onto something. They'll be putting banana peels. Pretty soon Nike will come out with shoes with a banana peel right in the beginning, so you don't have to mess with it. Right? Why? Because it just seems to keep working and working and working and working. And he's saying the theory must be vulnerable to falsification. His theory about the banana peel, I mean, what if we tested it and it didn't work? See? So we can test it. It's vulnerable to falsification. It's a valid scientific theory. Does that make sense? Okay. It turns out that evolution is not falsifiable. Now, I've gone round and round in debates with evolutionists. I've gone round and round on internet forums. They cannot think of any scenario. I've had people give me all kinds of wild ones where you can't invent some evolutionary explanation for what happens. Evolution can adapt to anything. Any possible scenario. It cannot be falsified. It's not science. It is not science. Evolution is metaphysical. Here's a guy by the name of Michael Ruse. Now this is important because Michael Ruse was the expert witness in the Supreme Court case Edwards versus Aguilar, where they ruled against mandating creation in the schools. And he argued evolution is science, creation is religion, separation of church and state, get it out of the schools. And he won the day in front of the Supreme Court. Now this guy did a 180. A few years back, he said, you know what? I was wrong. And he changed his mind. And it was a bombshell. Oh my goodness, were the evolutionists angry at him. And he said this, in 2005, in particular, I argue both evolution and creation, we have rival religious responses to